Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Everybody can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Communities of Healing. Our session today will be co-presented by myself and four of my colleagues who are all formerly incarcerated community members, social justice activists, and people with lived experiences of what communities of healing can look like. Just as an overview, we will go through a short slideshow presentation followed by a panel discussion, which we hope will spark a robust conversation with the audience during our Q&A session around not only communities of healing, but communities of inclusiveness that we can all feel a part of. Taking from the old adage, we truly believe it takes the whole village to save us all. Next slide, please. Is the slideshow up? Because I can't see it. Okay, yeah, right there. Before we can get to communities of healing, we need to give some background information on the problem of mass incarceration. What is mass incarceration? So mass incarceration has become a facet of American culture in which aggressive policing and incarceration are default tools for dealing with a wide array of social problems that can and should be solved by other means. These punitive approaches far exceed what is necessary to maintain public safety and primarily target low-income people and people of color. Next slide, please. This slide shows international incarceration rates as of 2011. The US incarcerates at a rate 5 times or greater than rates of other countries, despite the overwhelming cost to society. Many argue that incarceration dehumanizes the poor, people, minorities, and damaging already marginalized communities, and does not increase public safety. Additionally, high recidivism rates show that incarceration is ineffective and harmful to prisoners, their families, the victims, and their communities. Many formerly incarcerated individuals have difficulty reestablishing relationships, finding jobs, and staying away from criminal activity after being released. Next slide, please.
U.S. spends $81 billion a year on mass incarceration, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and that figure might be an underestimate. In 2017, the Prison Policy Initiative estimated the actual cost on state and federal governments and impacted families is roughly $182 billion. Those dollars go to staffing the criminal justice system and meet the basic needs of more than 2 million Americans who were incarcerated. But when those people leave prison or jail and reintegrate into their communities, support and rehabilitation is very limited. Government funding for parole and other reentry services is minimal in comparison to the amount spent to incarcerate people. Next slide, please. As we can see from this slide, pre and post war on drugs, Nixon in 1971, Reagan in the 80s, the Sentencing Reform Act of 1984, which abolished parole, created mandatory minimum sentences, and cracked down on drug crimes, including marijuana and crack cocaine. Mass incarceration correlates with the implementation of the war on drugs. Relying on the criminal legal system to address issues with drugs wastes money, creates a toxic relationship between the police and the communities they're supposed to protect, and does nothing to address problematic drug use. Next slide.
Melvin.
Melvin, you're muted.
Oh, my bad. Okay. Is it still echoing?
No.
Okay. Over 600,000 people make the difficult transition from prison to community each year. And although there are many challenges involved in the transition, the roadblocks to securing a job have severe consequences. Employment helps formerly incarcerated people gain economic stability after release, and reduces the likelihood that they return back to prison, promoting greater public safety to the benefit of everyone. But despite the overwhelming benefits of employment, people who have been in prison are largely shut out of the labor market. The unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated people is nearly 5 times higher than the unemployment rate for the general United States population, and substantially higher than even the worst years of the Great Depression. Although we have long known that labor markets outcomes for people who have been in prison are poor, these results point to the extensive economic exclusion that would certainly be the cause of the great public concern if they were mirrored in the general population. Next slide, please. A quarter of formerly incarcerated people do not have basic high school diploma or GED. At least an additional third, 33%, obtain GEDs as their highest level of education in lieu of traditional diplomas. Together, these two groups make up about 58% of all formerly incarcerated people who have traditional high school educations that were cut short. Next slide, please. Reentry, trends in the United States.
Brian?
I think that's me. Here we see reentry trends in the United States. At least 95% of all prisoners will be released from prison at some point. Nearly 80% will be released on parole or supervision. At year end 2002, 1,440,655 prisoners were under jurisdiction of state or federal correctional authorities. In 2001, about 592,000 state and prison inmates were released to the community after serving time in prison. Nearly 33% of state prison releases in 1999 were of drug offenders. 25% were violent, and 31% were property offenses. 670,169 adults were under state parole supervision at year-end 2002. By the end of 2000, 16 states had abolished discretionary release from prison by parole boards for all offenders, thereby getting rid of parole. Among state parole discharges in 2000, 41% successfully completed their term of supervision, relatively unchanged since 1990. Next slide, please. Barriers to reentry, right? Formerly incarcerated people face many barriers to reentry upon their release. Many formerly incarcerated people encounter severe difficulty in finding a job that will rehire them. When they do, it's often low wage with decreased opportunities for advancement. Occupational licensing is also a major hurdle, as many states make it very difficult to acquire licenses for technicians, security guard, athletic trainers, or to operate a dance studio, for a couple examples. Additionally, an overwhelming majority of states bar formerly incarcerated people from receiving federally funded public assistance, like food stamps and public housing. All right. There is also rampant documented discriminatory practices put into play on parts of landlords against formerly incarcerated people. Inadequate vocational tech training, substance abuse treatment, and mental health treatment in prison, probation, and parole systems are also a major barrier as well. Lack of opportunities to meaningful reentry in society increase likelihood of an individual to reoffend, and be back up in jail. Research by the Indiana Department of Corrections found the unemployment was the greatest predictor of recidivism. with unemployment, offenders being more than twice likely to reoffend than those with a job. Next slide, please.
All right, y'all. Thank you for bearing with us with our information presentation part. You know, I like the slide that Andre came up with. It's kind of like seasons of change, right? And I think that we are seeing sort of a cultural shift in the narrative around formerly incarcerated people. There's a lot of different kind of interests at play. You know, if you're talking about like the Department of Corrections or, you know, other sort of government bodies, I think that reducing recidivism is important from like a public safety standpoint. I think that for a lot of us, it's just a humanitarian concern, you know what I mean? But I think that folks are really starting to see that it's not purely a problem of personal responsibility when people recidivate, right? And so there is positive motion towards addressing some of these issues. And so it's just kind of an exciting time to be like a formerly incarcerated student, a community activist. I think that there's a lot of traction where there may not have been any in the past. Next slide, please. So as we sort of transition into our panel discussion, we just want to look at Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. You know what I mean? This is one of the most useful tools I've come across. It still stands strong, you know, since the 1950s. And as we look at people's lives and sort of like the need for intervention and you know, just the what we need to sort of rebuild a life and become our best selves, right? We got to start at the bottom. You know, people need their physiological needs met, you know what I mean? And our safety needs. And I think that, you know, like if we think back to that barriers slide, like this is where the biggest chunk of sort of institutional support comes from, you know what I mean? Like they want to help everyone get their food stamps. We're trying to work on housing. We're trying to reduce barriers to education, that sort of thing. But that's only a part of it, right? And so like, I always just think back to this conference that I went to at Evergreen, Tacoma, and, you know, they were sort of sharing the story of this individual who had been released on a bank robbery, right? He had a whole community sort of like waiting for him, you know what I mean? And you know, he just like bounced right into a labor union apprenticeship. You know, he's making $30 an hour. They got him housing, all this stuff, right? And then within a couple months, dude's robbed a bank again and back to prison, right? And it's so like where's the missing pieces, right? You know, like all the resources and all of the and all the sort of breaking down barriers to getting them that we can do doesn't really lead to a personal transformation in the way that we're looking for, right? We got to go further, you know. And so as we get past just like these basic needs of being able to eat and feeling safe and having housing and that sort of thing, the next step is like love and belonging, right? And so now we're starting to talk about that community piece. Like we're talking about relationships, we're talking about family, we're talking about friends, you know, just community involvement, which is kind of like the focus of today, right? Because without that, like we're not even moving on to having good self-esteem. You know, we're not moving on to having good esteem in the eyes of others, right? Because nobody sees us. And you know, and so we have to build like that sense of inner strength to even get to the part of like self-actualization, you know, where we're at, you know what I mean? Like we're over here trying to live our best lives. We're trying to sort of rewrite the narrative on what it means to have a conviction history and just really put our best foot forward, right? But without, of course, you know, the things lower on the pyramid, you know, we wouldn't even be there. So we can transition now. So thank you for bearing with us. We've made it to the panelists, the panel portion of our presentation. And what we want to do now, we're just going to reflect on sort of the title of our presentation. And I will start with Corey. Could you just talk to the group about like, what do you think about when you think about communities of healing for formerly incarcerated people?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Stephen. When I think about communities of healing, I think about communities that support you, communities that make you feel that you're a part of them. Could I have that last slide back up, please? When I think about my transition back into the community, I'm thinking about that last slide. And I'm thinking about how I was stuck on about rung 2 of that slide. I was released for the last time in 2004. And it wasn't until 2016 that I found my voice again. Just getting out of, I thought the way you started over was you got out of prison, you took the first minimum wage job you could find, and you would just have access to opportunity. You'd be able to keep your head down, work hard, do the right thing, and you'd be able to start this new chapter of life. Well, it doesn't work that way. There's over 48,000 collateral consequences that come with that conviction, that label of felon. And among those is everything from, a living wage job to housing to being able to volunteer and being a full participating member of our children's schooling. Thank you. And I was stuck on rung 2. And it wasn't until I met people like Tara Simmons that had been incarcerated, and they weren't hiding their shame. They weren't hiding that they were a felon. I was organizing with Tara for about 6 months. We were in spaces where everywhere we went, she would say, I'm formerly incarcerated this, I'm formerly incarcerated that, I'm going to law school. I'm gonna turn that corner. And it wasn't until about 6 months of knowing her before I even told her that I'd been incarcerated. That's how deep in hiding I was. And that's just because I wanted to be able to start over. I hope people had forgotten. And I didn't realize that I was doing a disservice to myself and people like me, because and I won't refer to myself as a felon very often. This is one of the times I will. This is the face of a felon. And, I started being pushed out of the educational setting in grade school for minor behavior issues like having cigarettes at school, things like that. And I was shown from a very young age that I didn't fit the shape of a normal person in society, or a normal kid, quote unquote. And I was shown that by being pushed out of spaces, even, I wasn't allowed to hang out with some cousins and other things because, I acted out sometimes. Well, instead of addressing the root cause of my acting out, I was pushed out. And that didn't change when I was released from prison. I didn't have I was one of the lucky ones that had family support, but I didn't have community support to release to wrap their arms around me and tell me, you are part of our community, you're our neighbor, and we want you. So that's, it's really important for folks that have been impacted by the system to be recognized as returning neighbors and to have the support of our community. And with that, I'll pass it on to who's next.
Brian, you want to give us your reflection
on communities of healing?
Yeah, just the idea.
It's a huge phrase in just a couple words, right? Community of healing, right? It encompasses so much, right, that was missing in my life for so long. Right, I too was released from prison last time in 2004. Right, that doesn't mean I stopped doing what I was doing to get me in prison. Right, it just means I wasn't in prison anymore. Right, my mind never changed. Right, because I don't want to use the word too much institutionalized, but it's kind of a true statement of fact. Right, whether we're in or whether we're out. Right, I believed what the world said about me was true. Right. Right, so I acted out on it, and as Corey said, right, this was kind of par for the course growing up. Right, I grew up in a lower income single mother house, right, who struggled to get ahead. Right, I was subject to adverse childhood trauma. Right, I have all these language to describe what I went through now when I look back. right? But when I was going through it, there was no language then, right? Nobody ever said this boy needs maybe a little bit of support, right? The community never rallied against these people who are falling behind. The community more like ostracized us, right? Well, say we'll focus on the ones that are doing well, and the other ones could catch up if they could catch up. Well, guess what? We don't catch up, right? It took me. It took a serious life moment, right? Aha, come to Jesus moment, right? At a point in my life for me to stop what I was doing, right? The details of it aren't important, right? But through that experience, I found that I needed community, right? I needed a place to heal. I needed a safe place that accepted me right where I was at, right? And didn't expect much more from me than that on that day, right? And then being in that safe space, right? I'm not talking about like living in a house, right? I'm not talking about having a lock on my door that I could come and go. I'm talking about a place where I could like be emotionally vulnerable, right? And just have it allowed, right? Okay, you know, not anybody trying to make me feel better, not anybody trying to fix me, but just sit there and allow me to be, right? So this is the beginning of where I found a community of healing, right? I was able to process the stuff that I didn't have language for when I was a child, right? So, you know, and I was open to suggestions because I felt safe, right? Brian, you're really good at this. Why don't you try going to school? Maybe you could do something there, right? I said, okay, well, I trust you because you didn't, you know, you accepted me for who I was, where I was, when I was there, right? And I went forward with it, right? So skip forward, right? I'm a single father now, right? Right? I have a teenage daughter, right? So I'm a custodial parent, right? I haven't committed a felony, a crime, a jaywalk in about 6 years, right? Right? I am what you would call your model citizen, right? I pay my taxes, right? I have car insurance, I have a driver's license. Now, these things sound like mundane stuff, right? Who cares, right? Who cares, right? I drove with a suspended license for 25 years. Do you think I had insurance in 25 years? No, right? So this is the mindset change, right? This is huge. And there's a lot of us out here like this, right? I'm not a singularity, right? I'm now, you know, in my senior year at University of Washington, right? Right, what this is top, what is it, Pac-10 or Pac-12? I mean, we're like a serious institution in the United States of America, right? I'm taking the LSAT on Saturday, right? Because of people like Tara Simmons who weren't afraid to say that we are formerly incarcerated, right? And setting precedents for people to come up behind us, right? If we are creating safe spaces through our actions all the way up the ladder, right? Right. And this is going to build to our resilience and the lowering of recidivism, right? Because it's okay to mess up, right? I make mistakes, you know, I pay for those mistakes and then I move on, right? Why does society hold me for one moment in my life forever, right? Because I went to prison. Am I a bad person now, right? Am I that window in my history now, right? I mean, this is a question we have to ask ourselves when we look at how we welcome people back into society, right? We sentence them to serve their time for a crime, right? When does that crime end? I mean, Corey has said it any number of times, it's an arbitrary time, arbitrary, 5 days, 10 days, 10 years, life, right? When are we done, right? You know, so, I mean, we need to step back, right? As a community of responsible people, right? Society as a whole, and relook at how we treat our members, right? I mean, you know, we're used to, you know, racism is bad, right? Discrimination is bad. Well, y'all, I mean, the world discriminates against formerly incarcerated people every day, right? We formerly incarcerated people are treated, right, subhuman, and it really, I mean, I'm on a pulpit here, right? But it needs to stop because I am going forward in my life, right? And whether I'm recognized or not. So, I mean, we need to not be the exception of the rule, but become the norm.
Nice, thank you. going to step out of my facilitator role and just kind of put a pin in this question, and then because I want to get to the other ones. But I'm just, for me, when I'm talking about communities of healing, I just really think about sort of like the dominant narrative of personal responsibility and you know, the isolated actor in society, right? And just the lie that we're told that capitalism is human nature, right? Like, I think we might have some leftists at this thing. You know, it's like human beings survived for the vast majority of our history based on our ability to work together and hold community, right? Like our ability to cooperate. And you know, things might have gone awry for a while, but that lie that we're told just about ourselves is one of the things that really just gripes me the most, you know, about the dominant narrative of society. But so that's just what I think of. But now we're gonna sort of transition in and just talk about our personal experience a little bit. And our first question just has to do with, so like the other side of community is isolation. And Andre, I'm gonna kind of pass to you. Just like, how did your life experience before and of course like during incarceration like lead to a sense of isolation?
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, fellow panelists. I would say that, you know, my life you know, pre-incarceration, you know, without knowing it, I was a victim of systemic injustice. I was, you know, raised in neighborhoods of violence. You know, I saw drug addiction and crime everywhere. I have, since I've grown up, I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD from childhood because I just have seen so much. I remember living in fear all of my young life, but pretending that I didn't. That's how I faced my school, people in my neighborhood. I had to tough up in my family. I had to take care of my little sister and brother. With all of this injustice and you know, lack of access to resources and things that was going on. And as I say, I didn't know this coming up. I never saw myself as a victim. I was just doing what I had to do, you know. But all of that led to a lot of choiceless choices that I was presented with, you know. So you know, you choose the lesser of two evils. You know, so do I go hungry, or do I do something illegal to feed my family or to feed myself? So that's the kind of and that was incredibly isolating because, as I said, I always hid away. I couldn't let anyone know what I was really feeling on the inside. Was confusion, was fear. Nobody would understand. Societal and family cultural expectations were put on my shoulders. And you know, I own every choice I ever made. But now that I've been given, you know, the tools to form a critical analysis of, you know, what had happened to me in my life, I understand that though my choices were my responsibility, they weren't always just my choices or just my fault. So, and then of course, in incarceration, you know, as a kind of resulting from a lot of those choices that I had made, you know, I had went through, you know, probably 30 years of drug addiction, you know, repeated incarcerations, recidivism, and just overall, you know, dysfunctional, unhealthy behavior patterns. And, you know, um, being incarcerated, I further isolated myself because, as one of the panelists have said earlier, you know, I internalized those lies that was told about me, and the beliefs that, you know, that I believed since I was a child. You know, when you're a child and you're growing up, you know, you trust the adults, you trust your adults, whether they be your family, your teachers. You know, you're supposed to trust them, and that's all you have to go on. So those societies, those images, and those messages told me that I wasn't good enough. My mother told me when I was a young boy that you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much as a Black man growing up in America. And how unfair was that? As a little boy hearing this, I was like, what kind of stuff is that? You know, and I didn't know exactly what my mother had meant. So, you know, later on in life, I found out what that meant. And so I internalized a lot of those things, further isolating myself through drug addiction, isolating myself in incarceration. And as Stephen has said, you know, come to find out, when I was given an opportunity, really a blessing to have an avenue of healing, the remedy and the medicine for all of that isolation turned out to be community, which I found at a community college.
Nice. Nice. Melvin, do you want to talk a little bit just about your experience with, you know, isolation through your lifetime and incarceration?
Well, I know that everybody has different experiences throughout their life, and I guess mine was definitely a little different. And I think growing up in junior high and high school, like Andre was talking about, drug addiction, drinking, and wanting to socialize, right? Wanting to be in a social atmosphere by doing drugs and drinking. And so I think when you talk about isolation, that isolated me from possibilities, right? That it's so amazing. My life is like right now is blessed. I am so blessed, right? That I decided to choose the path of going back to school, because I wish I would have known that this life existed when I was younger, right? That studying and choosing that life, the life of education, or better life than drugs and alcohol, and wanted to be sociable. If I would have known then, I would probably took a better path, right? I don't know if it would have been easier, but in my mind, right, it'd have been a better path. However, when you look back on your experiences as a whole, as a person, right, and you love the person that you've become, would you take your experiences away from that? Because that's how you got there, right? That's how you got to that point in your life. You believe that all the parts make up the whole. So there's a paradox that's developed there on whether you want to go back and change things, but if you change things, you're not where you're at, right? So like I said, I'm super blessed to where I'm at because of the opportunities and what Corey was talking about earlier about getting out and people saying, hey, go to work and, you know, get a job and be successful and move up, right? And I think that as an older gentleman, right, I'm in my 50s. Well, I'm 50, right? So I'm 50. So people are like going to construction, and, you know, I had a lot of friends offer me construction jobs. But I had to consider, do I want to work for a company for 10, 15, 20 years at construction? And what kind of quality of life would I have at 70 by breaking my body down for 20 years? So that's why I kind of chose the path of, well, let me be patient and try to go back to school, right? And try to get an education and use my brain instead of my brawn. And try to be successful in that area, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Melvin. I'm going to kind of put a pin in this one too. We've got about 10 minutes. 30 minutes really isn't long enough for a panel with this deep of questions. But, you know, just like I think about isolation, right? Like, so when I was in solitary confinement, experiencing torture at the hands of Washington State, right? I just remember like creating community with ants. Like I was down in Walla Walla, IMU North, and you know, I'd get my little box lunches with peanut butter and jelly in them, and I'd take drips of my jelly and put it on the floor, and I had like a little ant farm. You know what I mean? It's like, and so I think that just like really illustrates like that striving for connection that I had, you know what I mean? Especially in that place, like I was awful. So I don't know, that's sort of my pin in that part for us. And I really want to try to get to everyone. So I just want to tell you all that we've got about 10 minutes left and 5 people. So we're looking at about 2-minute responses. Brian, do you want to talk about, just your personal experience with finding access to community and like these communities of healing?
Yeah, I can, right? And thanks, Stephen. Finding communities of healing, right? For me, it was serendipitous, right? By chance. And that's a confounding part for me, right? I stumbled into a corner in the back of the student center at a point when I was in community college, when I was about ready to give up, right? It was hard. I was alone. Who do I reach out to? There's thousands of people and I don't know any of them. And frankly, speaking to the isolation point, I wasn't going to know any of them, right? Because whether I'm walking around in a crowd or whether I'm sitting in IMU, right, in the hole, right, I isolate, right. I could be in isolation in the middle of a room full of people, right, right. So, but I stumbled into the back of this place and there was this little room, little office, multicultural center, right. And I just kind of orbited it, right? Until somebody saw me there and, they're a little outspoken. They run the joint, said, Brian, come over here. You're going to do this with us. And then I was pulled in. I said, okay, right? But what that speaks to is I now had belonging, right? I found a place that wanted me there just because I would be there. Nothing more, right? Even if I didn't want to help, right? They would bother me every day and tell me to help, right? Oh, no, I'm okay. Okay, well, until eventually I did, right? So it needs to not be by chance, right? We can't put actions like this in the hands of the powers that be, right? The great, guiding forces of, whatever your higher power is, right? These need to be it needs to be action in place, right? There needs to be like organizations or some kind of community outreach that seeks out people like me, right? Okay. Right. So yeah, it's all about belonging, and we need to seek out people before they get backwards.
Right. Corey?
I'm sorry, I've been sick. Would you mind repeating the question? My head's foggy.
Yeah. Just your personal experience with finding community, just talk us through. You got 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll use part of my 2 minutes to thank Stephen for keeping us on track and so well as I ramble with my sickness. Reentering, I felt lost. I felt alone. And it wasn't until I found community that I felt valued again. And, I'm still not at the top of that list or that chart. I'm still only about the second one down where I'm learning to love myself again. I'm learning to see value in myself. And it really helps that I'm seeing that reflected on the faces and in the eyes of my community. And my community is showing me that I'm valued and I have worth. And I'll just go ahead and stop there.
We have until 2 p.m., by the way.
Oh,
so
yeah, but we got to transition into Q&A too.
Oh,
so,
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Melvin, do you just want to talk about finding community on the outs here?
Like I said, my transition has been awesome, right? And finding community within community college has been great. And it kind of goes along with what you're talking about, isolation. And I had to think is that we're isolated from technology while incarcerated, right? So most of my experience has been with the institutional lifestyle. So I always tell people I'm kind of locked in my own head as to the perception of how things work. Like asking a question to somebody, it's like, hey, how do I find such and such information? And then I realized that I have an iPhone that has all the information I need, right? So that's kind of, and it's actually helped me connect with community, right? To build community of network is having that ability to have a little computer to start connecting. At first, like I said, locked in my own head, I'm isolating myself from other people, from finding information instead of reaching out with technology that I have readily available.
Nice. Thank you. Andre?
Yeah. So as I shared a little bit earlier, my experience when I got to community college, man, I had ran away. I hadn't been to school in 30 years since high school. Kind of ran away from all of that because I didn't do well in high school because of, whatever social reasons and stuff that I had going on. But after being going through the drug addiction and incarceration and all of that, my mother's words just kept echoing to me that she told me that, you need higher education, son. And I ran from that, And so, I got tired of running. I decided to give it a chance. I got tired of questioning. I said, no more flipping, flopping around in my brain. Let's just go for it, right? When I got there, I guess I don't know if it works like that in all colleges, but when I got there, I found community, man, that I never even knew existed. I had people, there were supports that I could take advantage of. There was resources that I could take advantage of, even in the outer community that I started learning about. And I'm like, wow, if I had known any of this before, right? And so when I think about those, those communities of healing, I think about, what happened for me, which was coming into a community of acceptance, but not only acceptance of belonging, of activation and empowerment, because I had people telling me, man, have you heard yourself? You got something to say. We want to hear more. I was like, what? Who, me? You know what I'm saying? So this has started to help me to grow as a person, to connect, not only as a student, but as a person. And also what I was learning was in my experience with gaining this community, like I said, was an activism, a critical analysis, so I can look back and put things into perspective, so I can take all the blame off my own shoulders and say, hey, this is what really happened, and this is what it really looks like. Now I can accept my part of it. And then those same communities, one of my mentors from community college always told me that, feeding the hungry is not the same thing as ending hunger. So, going back to that Maslow piece, sometimes, we can, we provide those basic needs and we need that. But sometimes that can look like the biggest change, but can become one of the biggest challenges when we stop there. Right. So we need to, that's what I was given eyes to see and an activation to do something about when I got to community college. Then my eyes started turning, not only just from my own experiences, but to the people that are coming behind me, to the problem and the issues as a whole. And this was my transition into community, man. I stopped being a part of the problem that I had been for so many years, and I started living a part of the solution.
Yeah, once again, I'm gonna sort of just take like the last minute here, and I just want to reflect on what Brian was saying about we can't leave this stuff up to chance anymore, right? We have to be intentional about creating community, and we have a really good example of how that worked just in these in 4 of these 5 panelists, right? And I mean, Corey does too, right? Because civil survival was intentionally created by a group of folks, right? And that's sort of like where you found your place, right? For us, it was like at Skagit Valley College. We had this community integration project, which was a partnership between the jail and the college, trying to get formerly incarcerated people into school, right? Through that, we developed a student club. And after a couple of years, we're like, we really have a good program going here. And so we applied for a grant to the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges and went around the state and did some trainings at different schools on like how to create reentry programs. We ended up at Olympic College, right? And I hosted a student breakout session where we talked about creating student groups or student clubs for formerly incarcerated people to have a shared identity, a shared experience and all that stuff. And that's where Brian and Andre got together, right? And then from there, you know, that's where Melvin found a place to plug in, right? And so I just love that intentionality piece. I reflect on that a lot when I'm doing things, just like, you know, we can build what we need, right? And we just have to be intentional about it. So I just really like that. So thank you for bringing that up. Now we're going to transition to our Q&A. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A function. You can type into there, or you can type into the chat. I have a couple questions on deck in case, you know, we don't have anything forthcoming right away, but I'll just give you all a minute and we'll see where we're at. All right, so we have a question here. This is coming from the audience. I am representing men and women who are sentenced as kids to adult sentences at resentencing under the Domingo Cornelio Ali cases. Some have little family or community support left in their lives. I want to develop reentry plans and strategies for success. Are you available to assist or link me with peers and organizations that can help out? From Mary Kay. I mean, does anybody want to jump in and
Sure. I'll put my email in the chat. I'm happy to set up some time to have a conversation. Part of what we do at Civil Survival is we have support groups, and currently in 4 counties for formerly incarcerated people, and I'm happy to chat with you about those.
Also, I will put my information in the chat. You know, I'm a student, and I'm a part of you know, several student and community activist groups and things. And so this is one of those intentionality pieces that Stephen and Brian were talking about, and being intentional in creating community. So I would love to see how we can, I can support and how we can support one another. And I'll put my information in the chat as well.
yeah, and I mean, just sorry, what was so yeah, Mary Kay, I think that you just got a couple of really good avenues here to connect with community for the people that you're representing. Thank you for asking. You got another one from Omar. It just got bumped. Let me see here. I work with adults going in and out of jail and prison. When someone expresses an interest in going back to school and college, where is the first place to refer them to? I will jump on that real quick. So Department of Corrections and the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges have partnered on a navigator program. And so all counties in the state are represented. And we have these navigators embedded in certain schools. I mean, Skagit Valley College, Tacoma Community College, the Seattle Colleges system, Evergreen State College. There's some on the east side, and they're implementing them at more schools all the time. Olympic College is coming up with one, and really, this is like your one-stop shop. These are the folks that you will be able that. The person just be able to make an appointment with them and leave a registered student. You know what I mean? Paperwork is hard. I think there's something about this community in particular where paperwork can be like a non-starter. Part of that could be like, I remember going to Walla Walla, I signed a paper that said it's okay for them to shoot me on the yard. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, so we just have like these crazy institutional trauma experiences, right? And so somebody will actually sit down with you, help you fill out the paperwork, and just take all those barriers out of the way. And what I'll do is put Aaron Kirk's email into the chat. He's the navigator at Skagit, and you can just reach out to him and he'll be able to tell you who to plug into throughout the state, you know, wherever your people are at. Okay, and then we got another question here. Where can we as allies and advocates push for the most critical support for reentry and formerly incarcerated? I'm hearing amazing things about community colleges, which is a fantastic eye-opener. What about the people who aren't making their way to community colleges? And I love that. And Corey, do you want to talk about that? I think you have a little bit, but
yeah, a really great way to support us reentering the community is by supporting justice reform bills. Support, these barriers that we experience, these 98,000 collateral or 48,000 collateral consequences. They're just laws, and laws can be changed. So get involved with local groups, get involved with civil survival, and advocate and support legislation that will give us some relief from these barriers. Another way, also contact your elected officials. If you have family members that are a little more on the conservative side, or a little more, or are against us having opportunities, have conversations with them, because we're working to take control of the narrative of our stories and what it means to have that label of felon. And we need the help of allies as well, because you're in circles that we're not in. And so, some of my LGBTQ friends pointed out to me that in the 80s, when they were fighting for gay marriage, it wasn't until the allies got involved that they really started making some momentum and changing the hearts and minds of people. So we also need that.
Yeah. I want to weigh in real quick too. If you're part of an organization or a government agency or a nonprofit or whatever it is, you know what I mean? If you tap people like us to be part of your maybe committee work or to present at a panel or whatever, you need to pay folks, right? The ability to volunteer is a privilege that a lot of us don't have. You know what I mean? When you are asking us to drive somewhere to speak or to carve time out of our day to be on your community accountability panel or whatever, we have to take time off work. We have to find something to do with our kids. And so it really sort of narrows the scope of who's able to do it when you ask us to do it for free. Another thing is that when you begin your inquiry and look at us and say, we need someone with your lived experience, that's a resource that we have. You know what I mean? And it's a resource which you don't share. And so for a lot of us, that resource of lived experience is the most viable, if not the only resource that we have, depending on where we're at in our transition, right? So always push for economic support for formerly incarcerated people.
Hey, Stephen, if I could just add one more thing before we move on.
Yep.
I just remembered the space we're in. We also need pro bono attorneys representing people reentering, because as we remove these barriers, a lot of these laws, they aren't retroactive. And which means a lot of us that have already been through the system still need help to vacate our records. We need help getting legal financial obligation relief, because that came with a 12% interest rate from the time of incarceration. We need help. Folks need help with registry relief. Folks need, there's so many different things that folks need help with, and there's a serious lack of legal aid. And again, if you're an attorney, you can contact Civil Survival. We're working to put together pro bono attorneys. It'd be great if you were part of that.
Let me just chime in real quick, Stephen, before we move on also. I just want to say I love all of those supports for formerly incarcerated people as we're transitioning back into the community. But also, I would ask people to be energetic and passionate about raising awareness and in places about reentry, about the supports that formerly incarcerated people need, because there's a lot of traction in the movement as of late that I've seen, especially here in Washington State. But sometimes, in our different siloed, aspects of community and stuff like that, sometimes you can be the only light in the darkness. But you have to. We need people to stand up and speak up, advocate for formerly incarcerated supports, and then also. I kind of lost where I was going on that. But anyway, just to go back to wherever you work and wherever you dwell in the community and whatever things you're a part of, and to really just have a sense of urgency that we got some momentum going right now, and we need to really stick to that and keep it going.
I'd like to add, hold on just a second, Stephen. I'd like to add something to that too, because a lot of people are focusing on after, right, incarceration. Like, how do you help people after incarceration? There's also a piece where people have to be really proactive about their own, right, release and their release plan. So there's really isn't a big push for people to, I wouldn't say force or help people develop release plans while incarcerated, right? To, like Andre was saying, to help them identify those things that they need. Because if you don't identify them, how will you know if you need them, right?
Yep. All right. I'm going to transition. We got a couple in the Q&A here. It says, if you can name one or more things that legal aid organizations and associations could do to support y'all and to support formerly incarcerated folks better transition beyond physiological needs. I'll field that real quick and then pass it on. Hiring, you know what I mean? Hire folks with criminal histories. You know, I work at the Snohomish Public Defenders Association as an intern, and they didn't even do a background check. That's super important. You know what I mean? So giving people jobs is super important. When community calls for economic support go out, you know, for formerly incarcerated led organizations, get into your organization funds and help us out. You know, I think that really what people who aren't from this community can do the most is to support formerly incarcerated led efforts to address our own spiritual needs. You know what I mean? Our own community needs. And then does anybody else want to jump in on that one?
Yes, I'd like to, because I do believe what you said about encouraging companies or organizations to hire people with criminal history. And the reason I say that is because entities like the state and the federal governments, they push for companies, right? Advocate for companies to hire felons, but they won't hire felons. It's like a catch-22, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's barriers with that. Like, I was lucky to get a job as a student employee at Olympic College, the Multicultural Center, because I built a rapport with the supervisors that are at Olympic College. So they decided to push it through because there was a roadblock at HR that was preventing me from getting hired, right? So that's a real big roadblock that I had to overcome, or barrier.
I'd like to add one more thing to that.
Yep.
To the hiring piece that you all are talking about. And I'd like to say something, add something that I hear Corey add all the time, is that, you know, in other venues and stuff, is that, you know, if you are willing to hire people with conviction histories, you have to be intentional and really go out of your way to let people know that that's available. Sometimes people say, yeah, we'll hire formerly incarcerated people, but then we go, well, did you put that on the application process to let people know formerly people with conviction history are welcome to apply? That's very important, because sometimes we can go through things like belonging uncertainty and things like that, not knowing where we fit in society. And like someone else brought up, you know, how will we know what we need or what's available sometimes if people don't point it out to us?
And what that will do is that could eliminate, you know, a piece of self-sabotage, right? Because, you know, we get it, we have the habit of building up things in our head that aren't necessarily true, right? Realities like, oh, they will never hire me because I'm ex-incarcerated, right? They'll never hire me because I have this kind of stuff on my record, right? They would never hire somebody like me, right? Put it by being intentional about it, right? Putting out, yes, we will hire you, even, you know, because we want you to come work for us, because, you know, you've bounced back from experiences that weren't so positive in your life. You have a level of resiliency that could lead to, you know, a more loyal employee, right? Things like that, right? You know, like Corey and Andre said, right? You have to be intentional. And Steven, right?
All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Corey. We got 5 minutes left for this piece and one more question. Sorry. But maybe you want to jump off on this one. Curious if any panelists can speak to opportunities for belonging or community that they saw while on the inside, whether formal or informal. Sort of the idea of, if I had known that this was out there before, what potential is there to infuse that before folks walk out the gates in your mind, you know? So like, how can we find community in environments that are counter to a sense of belonging?
I'll go ahead and start. I didn't find that on the inside. On the inside, I found a bunch of other knuckleheads that I'd been doing stupid stuff with all in one place. So it was like a family reunion, and it was just reaffirming that I didn't belong as a normal person out in society, that I was right where I was supposed to be. And so I'm really grateful today as I do this work to see folks on the inside really working hard, folks like the Black Prisoners Caucus, Street, API, other organizations like that, and individuals advocating for themselves and advocating for change. So I'm seeing that exists now, but it didn't exist as far as I knew back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I like that.
Brian?
When I was in the 2000s as well, I think Corey and I were probably somewhere along the line bumping into each other while running around, right, acting like knuckleheads. Right, I didn't see anything that was like supportive. Most of the programs, if anything, you caught a program, right, and it was more it seemed more punitive, right. So instead of like trying to build them up, it was like something you had to do or you get punished, right. So I mean, the way it's approached, right? You know, I mean, first of all, we have to remember that not all people had supporting, nurturing childhoods, right? Don't come from places where they were celebrated, nurtured, and given hugs, right? A lot, right? So it's a negative response. Even if it's negative response, it's attention, right? So we need to change that narrative, right? So it needs to be more supportive and more celebratory, right? This might sound far-fetched, right? Because they're being punished, being in prison. But in order for somebody to find their self-worth, they need to be celebrated, right? You can even do that. Like I mentioned before, I'm a single father. How I discipline my child is more of an encouragement, right? And more of a directional, right? Than punitive, right? So we need to take these kind of hands-on approach to the way we interact, right? And the programs we provide going forward, right? And that could speak to lowering recidivism and things like that. It just, right? You can't always get what you want with a stick, right? You know, poking somebody, smacking them doesn't work. It gets poked and smacked back is what happens. So, to put it roughly.
Thank you. Does anybody else have one on this? Yeah.
Well, as far as community is concerned, for opportunities, opportunities for belonging or community inside the prison system. There's all different kinds of groups, right? There are groups that go to school. There are groups that hang out in the yard all day and be knuckleheads. There are groups that go to the sweat lodge. There are groups that go to church. So there are different groups that are involved or that are prevalent in the institution or statewide institutions. So with that being said, I had been involved in going to the Native American Sweat Lodge for years, and then getting involved in doing church. And there's a lot of people that get into the church that do wish that they would have known that lifestyle, just like going to school. If you go to school during your incarceration, then you practice that, and then you get out and you practice that going back to school, right? You build an intentional lifestyle for yourself to be successful if you're practicing those things while you're incarcerated. So a sense of belonging, yes, I do believe that a lot of people would have chose that lifestyle had they known that it existed, right? Because I was kind of in the same boat. I wish I would have known school, because I've met some 16-year-olds that are going to college, that already graduated and going to college. And so it was amazing to see that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the question. We're going to transition. I just have one last question for the group. And we've all got like less than 2 minutes to answer this. I'll go first. The question is basically like, what is your, what's your vision for the work that you're doing in the community right now? I'll start off. You know, I've my entire since I started in community college, I've been working towards creating communities for formerly incarcerated students on campus. And what I want is for every student who wants to walk onto campus to sort of just be able to start off with that, like, hey, I'm Steven Simmons and I'm a formerly incarcerated MSW student. And you know, I want everyone to feel safe to do that if that's what they want to do. And I want everybody to be able to find other students who are having the same experience, who are finding the same barriers outside of school, you know, so we can all get together and sort of commiserate and talk about solutions. You know, and I think I'm excited about like this next step that a lot of us are working on, which is a statewide group of formerly incarcerated students. And you know, this could push into the realms of voting blocks, advocacy. You know, it's just like the sky's the limit. If we united formerly incarcerated students across Washington State, like there's so much stuff that we could do, you know, to support each other and to further policy and stuff like that. And I'm gonna hand off to Andre. We got to kind of keep it short. We're running out of time.
Okay, so for me, what I want to see happen in the future of this work, or the work that I'm involved in, being the president of formerly incarcerated student association at UW-T, as well as a member of WASCOR, Civil Survival, the work we're doing at Olympic College with the Olympic College Reentry Collective. I'm really just want to see us reinforce the relationships with community, relationships and partnerships with community, things that we're doing right now. And then one piece that I really want to focus on is the relationship between, you know, student groups of formerly incarcerated communities, specifically between community colleges and universities. Because, you know, it seems like everyone's kind of, you know, trying to build these prison to school pipelines and things like that. But, you know, the way that community college had worked for me as kind of a soft landing from incarceration with the supports and stuff like that it offered, I really kind of believe in that. And Brian and I are both in a unique position where we are still co-facilitating the group that we started at Olympic College, and then we also are in the student group FISA at UW-T. So we both are really interested in building and supporting those relationships between community college student groups, formerly incarcerated, and those at universities.
Corey, we got 5 minutes left for everyone. What you got?
Can you center me real quick with the question?
It's just what's your vision for the work that you're doing?
Thank you. Yeah, so my vision, the short answer is I hope for people that have been historically excluded to be included and to see the value and feel the value of their stories and their voices. And the way we do that is we educate, motivate, and liberate through full-day workshops, teaching advocacy, through support groups, through advocating during session around bills, as well as we're working to develop a reentry legal aid project. So, you know, really my hope is for people to learn and feel the power of their voices.
Nice. Brian?
Yeah, mine's more abstract, right? As I go forward, I'm a member of FISA, Olympic College Reentry, WASCOR, working on this thing that we're doing, right? But there's a piece, right? What needs to encourage resilience, right? What do I need as a professional to throw in front of you to trip over, right? So you bounce, right? So you don't go back to where you came from, right? To where you find your self-actualization, the top of the Maslow's that we touched on, right? What is the interrupting factor that could encourage you or the individual to not reoffend, right? Or, you know, I mean, why do some people build that level of resilience or have it and others do not, right? What is that moment that's missed? Right? I would really like to find that, right? The magic question, right? The magic bullet.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Melvin, what you got?
Yeah, I'll take about a minute. Okay. First of all, I'd like to answer Omar's question. He asked if grants or scholarships. I do not believe people that are incarcerated can get grants or scholarships. That's my belief. And another is, what do I expect, or what I hope to, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you know, like Corey was talking about, to have those programs and for people in place for people that transition, right? Ultimately, it'd be nice if you had one person for every person getting out to be mentors or walk through the whole process, right? That's the grand scheme of things, is to have somebody to walk alongside and not make it like a, hey, 2-day process, you're out, right? Hopefully it's like a 6 months, a year process to help somebody transition back in the community. And that's hopefully what it gets to be. Okay, that's it.
Nice. Andre, did you say that you wanted to wrap with the WAS score, or do you want me to do that?
Yeah, I would just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope that you know, people have taken something away from this, and I'm really excited about this opportunity and the work that we're doing. But yeah, you can stamp that, please, Stephen.
Yeah. So one of the groups that some of us are working on is the Washington State Student Council on Reentry, WASCORE. We're currently planning a big fall kickoff event that's going to take place at Evergreen, Tacoma in October. So we're just going to, once we get our save the date materials together, we're going to be pushing that out everywhere. And so I encourage everyone to donate. I encourage everyone to attend. And we're just going to have a big celebration of reentry in Washington State. So thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. You guys shared a lot of really useful information. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.